live from the Mighty Veedverks Airship. We are going to have some fun today. We are here with Anne-Marie Doyle and Stacey Linn, and we're going to talk about Nuvolution and cannabis in schools, and probably a bunch of other tangents if I know us. We're playing Dub Conscious in the background. That's Adrian Zelski from International Hemp Exchange. He's a man of just many, many talents is all I can say. So thank you for not suing us, Adrian.
Very nice. So, I want you to tell me about Nuvolution, like somebody has just walked up to you, because it's so exciting. And I'm like, I hope I'm your still favorite flunky.
Thanks for having me. I would love to share about Nuvolution. So Nuvolution is a 501c3 nonprofit that supports social enterprises and nonprofits that are cannabis friendly. And what that means is it doesn't have to be a cannabis specific organization, just something that supports cannabis and isn't anti-cannabis. Which is big. There's a lot of organizations out there that just want no part of it, and there's other ones that they're on the fence, but they don't want affiliation. Like, we support you, but don't put our logo up. Right. And that's not friendly. That wants to be friendly, but they're not there yet. So Nuvolution pairs skilled volunteers with nonprofits and social enterprises that are needing support, that just they need to remove some obstacle from their path so they can achieve their mission. We recently received a grant for 2,200 square feet of warehouse space in Denver, yes, and we are converting that into the first ever cannabis community center. It's a non-consumption event where we will hold community events and have really affordable venue space for nonprofits, social enterprises, and the community at large. And all of the profits, because our mission is about supporting the community, everything that we do goes back into the nonprofit. So by supporting us, you're supporting the community at large. And we hold monthly lunch and learns on the third Friday of every month. Tomorrow we are actually having a lunch and learn about medical marijuana in schools, and Miss Stacey Linn is one of our featured speakers, and we all know her from Jack's Law, and we also have Hannah Lovato.
So Jack's Law, just for people who don't know, your son Jack was at school and he was using his prescribed cannabis-based medication and was wearing a skin patch, and the school nurse took the skin patch off, and
I got really mad and marched down to the Capitol, and first we amended the Caregivers Act of 2015 to allow cannabis in schools, because as I was informed by the snotty school nurse, it was actually in Amendment 20 somewhere, I haven't actually read that, I have to tell you, that it isn't allowed in schools, mostly because of the drug-free zone thing. So we amended it, allowed that to happen, and then no schools would do it. So in 2016, went back to the legislature and this time I wrote the law. I wrote the law, and I won. Yeah. And requiring schools to accommodate kids who need medical marijuana, mostly based under the current federal laws that protect children with disabilities in going to school. And then this year we came back again. A young man named Quentin Lovato needed his seizure medication at school, and his mom couldn't get to school to give it to him. And we knew this was a problem with Jack's Law. We tried, and they said no way. So we gave him a couple years. They saw that everything is fine. Kids weren't smoking up in the hall, other than the naughty ones who do that anyway. But Hannah, his mom, went and talked to her state representative, and we all came together and got Quentin's amendment passed in this past session to allow school personnel to administer medical marijuana at school. It's not required, but they're allowed to do it. So it's pretty big for kids who need seizure medication and cannot wait for their parents to get there. Also, a lot of kids are still were still unable to go to school because they did not have a parent, or the parent didn't have a caregiver who could get to the school. So in essence, part of the reason
working parents, that's hard.
Oh God, yeah. And then people say, oh, can't you get a caregiver to do it? Yeah, well, people with kids with special needs, a lot of them don't have a high income, so they can't afford to pay a caregiver, and volunteers are not reliable enough because the nature of volunteering is I'll do it if I can.
Right.
And so yeah, there's still, that's kind of how we press this bill forward,
Right.
is saying, the whole point of this is that kids who use medical marijuana aren't excluded from school, and they still are being excluded from school. And
Well, it's not easy for a kid to get a medical marijuana card, right? How many doctors do they have to see?
well, technically by law, they have to see 2 cannabis doctors, or doctors who prescribe or recommend for their medical condition. However, a lot of times with special needs kids, they already have 15 doctors, and they usually need to have at least one of those doctors who follows their condition on board with the idea of cannabis. And they're not like a doctor from Children's Hospital wouldn't be following the child or, making cannabis recommendations and dosing. However, you really have to have one of your physicians on board, especially the more complicated issues a child has.
Oh, absolutely.
So you really need a lot of medical, advice.
Right.
And so it's not like parents can just willy-nilly up and say,
Right.
hey, I would like marijuana for my kid. It's a
Right.
big process.
Oh, I keep tapping you on the foot. I'm playing footsie with Stacey. But let's talk about the choices we had as mothers. And I have a child that has epilepsy, so I live this nightmare. The choice these parents have is a suppository, a huge one, and my obstacle was I had a 6-foot tall, 250-pound child, and that was his rescue med in Louisiana, and that's the rescue med for a lot of these kids. But when you administer that,
Wait, I'm sorry. It's seriously
pharmaceutical-
that big?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
It's a lot
What
of
if he
medication.
wasn't 6'5" and I mean you like
Well, it might be a little
putting
bit
a pig
smaller.
on
It
a
might be,
spit.
yeah. It comes in a
okay,
case.
Okay,
this
so they
big,
do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted
But
to. I
as
just wanted to
they're-
make
that
sure.
whole
That's
thing
fine.
doesn't go up there.
No,
The
just-
medication's that full.
Yeah,
And
that's-
then the part that goes in is probably it's still about that long.
Yeah.
Because it has to get up in the colon so it won't.
Wow.
Right.
Because it gets absorbed into
Yeah.
that wall. It's just one of the quickest
Now
ways.
think of a seizing child, or even like Jack in a wheelchair.
And that's the exact he
But-
didn't have seizures, but he needed that same rescue
Right.
medication. And if he is stiff as a board and in a wheelchair, how does he get it?
Yeah, but the thing is with that medication, it is so deadly
Oh yeah.
that when it's being administered, somebody needs to be calling 911, and you have a short period of time to get your child to the hospital before that medicine kills your child. It just like, excuse me?
Awful.
That's the rescue medicine.
That's
And
the
that's
rescue
what
med, that's the
what people are,
pharmaceutical.
and they're
Terrifying.
telling us that I had Child Protective Services called on me because I refused to give Jack a medicine like that. And so not only are we are almost required to give deadly medicine to our kids. And the thing that strikes me the most about this entire thing is the argument that we get at the Capitol and in policy is all the time, we don't know the unintended consequences. There's no long-term studies. It's like, okay, let's go with that. Okay, let's pretend that on the horizon is some scary, horrible consequence of taking cannabis. We know there isn't. Nobody's ever died from it. But let's just pretend
Right,
that it
just
could
for a
happen.
minute.
Let's just say that. Then what makes it different than any other pharmaceutical medicine that you force us to give our children?
Right.
I mean, and besides that, it's ludicrous. One drug, you don't have to call an ambulance. One drug, you do.
Right.
Which drug as a parent are you going to choose?
Right.
And why all these people think that we should not have the freedom of choice to make that decision. I mean, some parents don't choose marijuana. They do choose that drug, and
Right.
that is up to them.
Right.
However, we need the right to choose. And I don't know any parent who would, once they were educated,
Sure.
most of the parents, when they find out that that it's not going to kill their kid and they can get away from the people who are scaring the crap out of them, they would much rather
Right.
give them a medicine that's not going to kill them versus one that does. And then all the brain damage, this possible effect on the developing brain. The AMA, American Medical Association, put out a statement in April saying that there is no proof of an effect on the developing brain. So they can shut up about that because, of course,
We need to get
it's
loud
a
about that.
neuroprotectant.
Right.
Maybe-
It's actually causing
maybe with the exception-
inflammation to go down.
Right.
in
I'm going
the
to say
brain.
this though because I need to talk to both sides of the story. The worries that people have about effect on the developing brain and also psychosis, which I'll get into at the Lunch and Learn if you come tomorrow, because that's psychosis is part of the reason the governor vetoed the autism bill. And what happens is they are finding some problems being caused by heavy-duty dabbing in teenagers. Okay, now why is that surprising? Though I don't think anybody's surprised by that.
Yeah.
But that's
people,
not medical marijuana.
No,
that's
right.
kids
No.
using it recreationally, and that's
using
an entirely different
that's
conversation.
And that's exactly what we had to do, is separate these things. You know, after an extensive talk with Governor Hickenlooper, that was the only excuse, though, that he had for vetoing the bill.
Is that because kids dab?
No, actually, it's even worse than that. His excuse was his friend's son, and this is a horrible situation, and I'm not making light of it in any way. However, I am going to use it in reference to why it's inappropriate to use against mothers trying to medicate with cannabis. This young man he was smoking marijuana for whatever reason. I didn't get the details.
Recreationally.
Recreationally. I would argue that because he was probably using it medically because he had problems with depression and things. And a lot of people use cannabis for depression.
Right.
Whether they have a doctor's prescription or not, it's a natural substance.
All use is medical.
We know what feels good to our
Over
body.
the counter
right?
versus
Not
Right.
all use. Sometimes
Right.
it's totally
Sometimes no.
recreational.
Some of it is
a lot of people who smoke a half a joint a day or something, that it seems maybe like it's recreational, but what it really is it's keeping
Right.
their act together.
Right. But there are people, and this is true of anything. There are people who have addictive personalities. People get addicted to
Yeah.
smoking,
Sugar.
eating, other people, sugar, exercise, gambling, sex, you name it. And so cannabis is more, you could get addicted to it in the same way you would get addicted to
A security blanket.
yeah, right, or something that's not it's not physically addictive. It's a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Like gambling is not physically addicting in your sensors. It's just a habitual thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, can you abuse cannabis? Sure, you can abuse anything. I've heard of other weird things that people abuse, and of course. So, but why are we legislating
laxatives.
to that?
Right.
Right? No, I'm not. You're
People
right.
are buying like just boatloads of like Imodium or something like that, because if you take more of that than I could fit in my body, it somewhat is like an opioid.
Ew.
Like,
That's
I mean, how
disgusting.
messed
I've
up
heard of
is
that
that?
for a
Unbelievable.
diet, to
Well,
try
the
to
diet
lose weight.
part-
No,
Right.
yeah, I'm talking about taking it for like
Like to get a high or to
yeah,
get a euphoric feeling.
yeah.
So we've established that. So this young man, he, as reported to me, he started using marijuana and came down with adult onset bipolar and then committed suicide. Now, the governor's friend is blaming that on marijuana, and he has a doctor who's saying that it is because of the marijuana. However, my mother has been an award-winning psychiatric nurse for 35 years working in those fields with bipolar and schizophrenic patients primarily. And as I called her up, she's like, there is no known cause of bipolar, and certainly it's not marijuana. And that's a lot coming from my mom. She's ultra-conservative on that front. But yeah, there is no known cause of adult onset bipolar. So could we posit perhaps that someone who happens to use marijuana also happened to get adult onset bipolar? I mean, some people, we have all kinds of habits in our lives that don't cause something, and yet we're going to latch onto that and veto the bill because it's too dangerous, because somebody might smoke weed, get bipolar, and kill themselves.
Cannabis saved me from.
Those people are more important than the children with autism.
I got adult onset bipolar, and they started putting me on experimental drugs in 1997, and cannabis saved me from bipolar and also from those medications.
My aunt can
that's,
also same thing.
I mean, that's my patient story. That's my.
I know.
That's my patient story, is that with bipolar depression, I was I don't know, 25 or something, and I saw a commercial as "Ask your doctor about Zyban," and I was smoking, and I was like, well, sounds like a good deal. Take a pill, stop smoking. That, and so I went to the Air Force doctor and asked asked him about Zyban, and he said, no, that's a psychiatric thing, so you need to go to the shrink. And he wrote me a recommendation for the shrink, and I said, no. So, and then I went to a civilian doctor and said, hey, I'd like Zyban. And he said that, asked me a bunch of questions. He said, I'll give you Zyban, but there's this phase 2 clinical trial for a drug called Lamictal. And so it's been used in epilepsy, but it's people with bipolar found that it works and stuff. And so once you want to be in this trial, and I said, yeah, I just quit smoking, but let's do this. And so I didn't know if I was in the control arm or the treatment arm, but it turned out I was in the treatment arm. And so I started taking Lamictal in 1997. And once you start taking Lamictal, you can't quit taking it. It's like a big deal. You need to have contingency plans to check into the hospital.
Oh,
They say for every 2 years that you've been on it, you're supposed to titrate off of it for a year. But and then there was bupropion, triazolam, Adderall, what else? I mean, a bunch. And that's what I moved to Colorado, taking that load. And so I, the biggest risk with Lamictal, I'm sorry to sidetrack this whole thing, but
No, this is interesting.
The biggest risk with the horrific thing that can happen with Lamictal is that you'll get a rash that can be fatal, and it will wreck you. It is terrible. And so last fall on Veterans Day, I broke out in a rash, and I had just been camping, and I thought at my alma mater, the Air Force Academy, my son and I went there for a Boy Scout camping trip, and see, we're normal people, by the way, but, and so I thought I was just having an allergic reaction to the pollen from all the, Air Force Academy, but approaching Christmas, I thought, I might be having a drug reaction. And long story short, you're supposed to titrate off for a year for every 2 years you've been on it. I've been on it since '97. I just quit on Christmas this past Christmas. I just quit, and
How hard was that?
it sucked for a couple of weeks. It really messed with my vision. It really messed with my vision.
How
But
did it
when I
affect
got-
your mood? Oh, sorry.
When I got off it,
No, while you were taking it, were you erratic?
no, I think it helped.
Did you?
Yeah, I think it helped. But the thing is, though, I was still taking Lamictal this whole time that I've been, I had a big, solid 5-year overlap with cannabis and Lamictal. And
Cannabis healing you.
turns out, man, if I could have just been prescribed cannabis in 1997, I would be a much healthier person. I wouldn't have put all that shit through my liver. And I don't need those pills. I don't want those pills. And that's so.
Well, that's
will
what they do with
cannabis
kids.
cause bipolar?
Yeah.
Maybe. Never say never, but I'll tell you for a fact that it'll get you off a hell of a lot of bipolar drugs.
Well, and that's that's what we're talking about here, is that if there are side effects to cannabis, so far, they are not as bad as the drugs we take.
Right.
I mean, watch a commercial for this laundry list of side effects. Cannabis has things like, maybe hyperemesis if you smoke too much. Okay, so you're going to throw up, perhaps.
But you have to have a lot.
Yeah, and you got to have a ton.
You got to be almost taking
And we don't know if that's
cancer ratios.
cannabinoid based or if it's due to
or
something
what's
else.
in it,
There-
right.
Right.
So let's even say it just causes that. Let's just say
Okay.
sleepiness.
Okay.
Okay.
wanting to take hot showers.
Hungry, which is actually a desired result in a lot of
Right.
cases, and
But
anyone
sleepiness
else?
is a
I mean,
desired
so-
result for
right,
a
exactly.
medical
So
patient.
these things could be good.
Absolutely.
But so here I am. I'm struggling to find out, come up with consequences to taking cannabis when even aspirin can kill you
Right.
faster. I mean, aspirin, ibuprofen. These things are all toxic to your liver, to your stomach lining. Cannabis is not. So the sole reason that cannabis is not used anymore in the U.S. pharmacopoeia is because somebody just made a racially based, money-driven decision.
Right.
Yep.
And
Right.
that's it. It
Right.
was a standardly prescribed medication until like around 1940-ish.
Yep.
Well, I took Lamictal too
1937.
Yeah, there was
for
37.
seizure in brain activity, and it actually was causing me to act like I had dementia.
Really?
Yeah.
So my
Oh,
aunt
I
said.
forgot to pick up my grandbaby. I would forget I was cooking, and that was the big thing with my family. I started burning food, and they were like, "You're getting off of that," you know. But I wanted to tell you too. I have a cousin that is working with the vets, and he's a psychiatrist, and he was like, all he's ever been taught was that cannabis did cause anxiety, and it's so refreshing for him to reach out to me and go, and me be able to provide him with other avenues of like, look, it really doesn't, because where he's at, that state has just gone legal, and
Can I
he's got to
interrupt for
jump
just
into
one
that.
second? This is Dre Gaines, who is very involved in the initiative to legalize medical in Oklahoma. And you guys are voting in like 2 weeks. And you need to vote yes on State Question 788. Legalize marijuana for medicinal use in Oklahoma this year. We know none of y'all are from Oklahoma. How many damn Oklahomans do we know? Because
I
of-
know a lot.
a lot
Amy
of
Donber.
them. Get all of them. Go back to Oklahoma. Send them all back to Oklahoma. Take your people back.
No.
Take your refugees.
Except for
No.
two.
We want to
Yeah.
keep a few of them. We'll cherry pick.
A
But
lot of the refugees want
so
to go
Dre
home.
Gaines.
Go
They,
home.
to have to live in a place
Without your
because
family.
without your family, without your support system, without the
The
people,
life you built.
yeah, to because you need a medication is so unfair and wrong. And you know, when the Turners to go back to Illinois, like that
They
was
won.
such a celebration.
They won.
You know,
Yeah.
that's amazing, and we want people to have that experience. You know, I don't want
Yeah.
my friends to leave necessarily, but you know, but
Yeah.
I get that to be able to
Yeah.
to hang with your family
Yeah.
and have, you know,
That makes me
holiday
sad thinking
meals
about-
and
like that's we know each other largely through the like the
Activism.
refugee community
yeah.
of our friends. Like we know each other because we're largely involved with trying to help these people who have had to move to Colorado to help their kids
Or themselves,
or themselves.
right?
or themselves. And so that if we actually win this, they will get to go home. So
Yeah.
we
Absolutely.
must miss them. But
one
this
of the
is
things that I find really amazing is I meet more and more people every day that are coming to Colorado as refugees, but as a first choice and not a last resort.
Yeah.
They
Right.
want to try
Yeah.
cannabis before
That's-
they're doing the
that's good
prescription
news.
That was
medication.
me.
And to me,
That's
is such
great
a
news.
powerful
Yeah.
statement to not just, the education that is provided, but people being aware.
Right.
Because you can't absorb the knowledge without having an open mind if you're completely shut down.
Yeah.
And and to see how it's helping and just the anecdotal studies, and it's incredible to me, and it's huge.
Well, I mean, that's me. Because in 2014, when my dad was passing, I was looking into the eyes of my sisters who were going through chemotherapy. And I knew I had cancer too. And I'm like, you're not doing that to me. You are not doing that to me. And so when I decided to fight clean. I let them take the cancer out of my body. I loaded a U-Haul van, put my youngest son in college, and I hightailed it with 2 dogs and a parrot. Came out here, and it's, you know, and with the love and support of everybody, got on the right track, and you know, but yeah.
I think there's a misconception too. People who don't support cannabis or believe in cannabis think it's a bunch of, you know, kooky hippies that are just they're yeah, and
Well, they've been trained to think that
yes,
for
and-
many
but
generations
there are
now.
people who are combining their cannabis therapies with Western medicine. It's not an either or. It's how can people live the life that is best for them or their child, because most people, they just want normal, you know, and if normal means that your kids can go to school, if you can have a job, if you can function at a capacity that you just can't otherwise, why shouldn't people have that choice?
Well, and this is also an area, I've got a secret. It wasn't just cannabis that brought me out here. There was a doctor that was doing an intravenous vitamin C therapy that was doing really well in Mexico. And there was a doctor here. And that's why I chose Denver, because it wasn't just cannabis, but I had my other holistic opportunities. I could eat cleaner here. You know, I love South
Unless you
Louisiana.
like seafood.
Yeah.
And
Well-
if your diet includes fish, Colorado's not.
No,
Well,
it
see,
is
and
not.
that's
Don't
the
move to
thing.
Colorado for the seafood.
Here I thought, living as a traditional Cajun, I had a garden where I had lots of vegetables that I grew myself. I knew that was organic. My sons and husband shot and caught all the meat we ate. I thought I was living clean, but you know what? My food drank the water. And Baton Rouge, Louisiana is Cancer Alley. We are the toilet bowl of the United States, literally. And when I got
Topeka,
sick,
Kansas is the second runner-up.
yeah. You know, I was working environmental issues and monitoring people getting Alzheimer's and other neurological, children being born with neurological, watching the increase. And so when I got sick, here I was already an advocate, going back and forth to DC fighting. And I'm going, okay, I was given a tiny little cancer. Maybe I'm being reassigned, you know? It just, that's what it felt like. I just got reassigned.
Yeah.
A new block grant just came down. Universally block grant, your behind's going, we need you there.
I'm so grateful that it did.
But, you know, just like this podcast, you know what? This is for people in illegal states,
Yes.
like Louisiana, like Oklahoma, you know, where, and I promised I was bringing back the information. And this is one way, you know?
You know, one of the things, circling back to Stacey, and the schools, that really makes me crazy, and every organization, whether it's a school or a job or your family, everybody has rules about how medication is handled, right? And the schools, you know, for my kids and everybody else that I know, you have to have a note signed by your doctor. The parent has to bring it into the nurse. They sign it into the nurse's office like you're bringing in contraband. The only way the child can get Advil or, you know, anything is to go to the nurse's office and have it signed out. At the end of the school year, if you want it returned, the parent or guardian has to go in and pick it up. It does not get sent home with the kid. And I feel like when we talk about kids and cannabis in schools, and people are concerned about what about the kids and they're going to share or they're going to be exposed, that's not how it works.
No, absolutely.
You left out a very in-depth safety protocol that's done at the first in the
Absolutely.
IEP, and they're, you know, and our child's cannabis nasal spray is not going to jump over here in this child's EpiPen.
Let's talk about the kids who we're talking about. These aren't kids who typically are running around and sharing gummy bears with their friends. They're kids who can't walk. They're kids who can't breathe right. They're kids who are living just a miserable existence in several ways. And cannabis is the only thing that gives them any sort of relief.
Right.
Absolutely. And
It's
you
their-
know, that's the big misconception is, again, you know, that people are just going to be lighting up joints in school. And it's like, you know, I spoke to this a lot, and part of the reason we got this law passed, Quinton's amendment, to allow administration in school is explaining that the kids with special needs have a special needs team at school. They have
Yep.
an individualized education plan, an IEP, and a health plan. I mean, I don't know any kid with an IEP who doesn't have a health plan as well.
Right.
This is done with the nurse. My son had 18 people on his IEP team. Okay, and it's a very, you become pretty tight with your IEP team because you have to leave your special needs child with these people all day long and trust them, and they need you because they don't know how to do this without, because the child can't
It's a
tell them what
team.
they need.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an absolute team. So the children who are severe enough to be needing to have dosing of cannabis at school have one of those teams. They already know probably who would be willing to or not willing to give them their medical dose during that day. And because I'm going to make this clear, this law did not require that schools do it. It's kind of like we did with Jack's Law. First we came in with Jack's Amendment and said this is allowed, then we came back with Jack's Law and said we're requiring this. So baby steps. So we're allowing it because we know that this actually came from parents and their teams at school, and the team, someone on the team, maybe it was the paraprofessional, maybe it could have been the librarian who spends a lot of time with the child because the child's always in there, the physical therapist, whoever it is, they were like, you know what, I would totally give him his cannabis if I didn't get fired. And
or risk losing their certification,
everything.
right?
And
But
so
let's do
we-
add
but
about
we-
the principal, though.
Well, the
Please.
principal can do it too. Any school personnel can do it, and we already kind of know. The parents probably already know whether that needs to happen at their school or not. So this isn't like, I don't know, people blow it into this giant hysteria. And let's bring it back to this. There are approximately 300 or so kids on the medical registry. We're talking about 300 kids, and of those, not all of those need. We're talking maybe 200 kids as of yet. They're all babies, so they'll probably get it because they're pretty new to it. A lot of them are refugees, just moved here. But we're not talking about, nurses running around with cannabis. We actually, as the bill was introduced, it was for nurses to administer, and I didn't do the bill title, and I kind of said that ain't gonna fly with the nurses.
And they came in and
so I
tried
just said,
so hard to shut it down, too.
oh, they did. But even those nurses that tried to shut it down, they are administrative personnel. They are not on the ground floor nurses. There are no nurses, by the way. In Jefferson County schools, it's about 4,000 kids to one nurse.
Right.
An
Wow.
area nurse comes by maybe once to see the child, or not ever sees the child. They just review the health plan.
It was nothing
Everything
but
else is
noise.
called
Right.
delegation.
Yeah.
And the only concern that those nurses in the administrative positions have is that that one school nurse delegates all the duties to the paraprofessionals, who, by the way, can be like 19, 20 years old. So they are going to delegate to them giving my son phenobarbital, which
Right.
is one of the ones where you have to call the
Right.
ambulance.
Right.
And these kids are like, I'd much rather, can I just give the cannabis tincture under the tongue, please?
Yeah,
Or the
yeah.
nasal
Yeah.
spray,
Yeah.
And they all said, we'll do it. And the nurses, so again, with the nurses, they've never met the child. They're not working closely with the IEP teams. And this is not to dog them at all. It's just the way it has to be, because apparently we don't think we need to have nurses in school, which I think is terrible. But I think they are more susceptible to the hysteria of it because they have the bureaucratic people on their heads too. And what I do know to be true about nurses, though, is if we make a way for them to administer under their license clearly, and that's under the Nurse Practice Act, and this is important to know. So when you need to change a law, it's not always about the direct law you think it is. So not only do we need changes in school law, and we need changes in the Nurse Practice Act in the state of Colorado. And there are many nurses. In fact, there are nursing associations just for cannabis. And there are nurses administering cannabis because they can administer it under their license-ish.
Right.
If the parent, this is how we did it. The parent tells the doctor what they want. The doctor orders the nurse, as per parent request, administer this. So it's not a prescription. It's not a doctor's.
That's not
but
even a
it's a doctor's.
recommendation, then.
No, it's a doctor's order
Okay.
The doctor, it's just like if the doctor ordered a bath.
Right.
The bath will be given even if the doctor didn't say medically you need a bath 3 times a week, the request under like it's called a 405 or 485, it's a Medicaid plan, which most kids are on. The doctor has to say it for the nurse to do it, for the home care nurse to do it. So the doctor says, as per parent request, child will receive a full bath 4 times a week. I know this because I had to do this because I just want to do bed baths all the time. So, but that's not so that can be done with cannabis.
Right.
Same with like lavender drops.
Right.
The doctor orders that lavender drops will be placed in the diffuser 3 times a day next to the child. It's not quite that simple, but it's pretty close to that. So you can do that with cannabis. So a lot of nurses do it for that reason because they know how much it helps their patients.
Right.
And most nurses are so all about the best care for their patients.
Sure.
And I mean, I worked with millions of them over Jack's life, and they really are quite protective of their patients. But the thing they have to be most protective of is their license because they can't practice without it.
Sure. Right.
And they've been scared to death over cannabis. They've been, threatened and the whole thing. So I'm not dogging nurses at all. And they want to do it. They're like, I am totally down. You fix it in the Nurse Practice Act. You make it so there's no way I can lose my license. I'll do it.
Right.
But that being said, there are nurses in school who would do it. Like in some rural places, there is a nurse around, but otherwise but we included them by saying, I just said, look, you guys, because I had a couple stakeholder meetings with the nursing community, the Colorado Nurses Association, the Association of School Nurses, at the school level. And they're like, we will fight this all the way we can't. And so I'm like, you guys might be a good time to amend that to school personnel. And sure enough, that kind of did the trick. And we actually they stood down quite a bit when we made it not call so much attention to them.
Right.
They were really a lot more comfortable. Not that they ever actively supported it, but
They weren't opposing necessarily.
They would oppose if asked, but they weren't bringing it out front other than in testimony.
Right.
But there weren't any, we only had one group of nurses who did. But I think the key is that it should be a choice, and we have given them a choice. If a nurse wants to do it, they can. I know parents personally who have a nurse who's going to do it. And that's because in their environment, it's appropriate. In their school system, it's appropriate. The threats there must not be as great as maybe in, East High School in the middle of Denver.
Right. Right.
It's all individual.
Well,
and that's what we all need is a choice.
Well, I think it's important to address the non-medical need for kids as well. We're talking about medical marijuana that is recommended by 2 physicians for a child. Children who do not need medical marijuana are a whole separate story. That becomes a conversation about what are your rights and a responsibility as an adult. Same conversation you're having with your kids about alcohol. It is illegal below a certain age. You are not allowed to do that. If you make silly choices, you are going to have some silly consequences that you have to deal with, and that is the bottom line.
And
Like
by
being
the way-
debilitated on Fortnite.
Yeah, well, but by the way, kids been smoking marijuana since the dawn of time.
Right.
And if they
I
want to
mean,
find it, they're going to find it.
People like to think that, and by the way, the CDPH even reports the statistic, teenage use is down since
is.
legalization. Because for one
Because
thing,
it's lame.
It's because
That's what your dad does.
Right, it's what your
Why
dad
would you do?
does.
Your dad does it. That's all he does.
That's
He has a
Oh
whole
my
company
God.
that does it. He has a whole company that does it. Why would you do it?
Yeah, and plus it's not as rebellious.
Right.
It's not
I mean, it
rebellious.
is 'cause
it's
it's
medicinal.
illegal.
And he also knows that what we're doing is we're helping
His friends.
his friends.
Exactly.
Well, I wanted to. When my kids were growing up, I had one son on Ritalin and one on Adderall, and they had more people trying to, hey, let me buy a
Right?
pill. Let me
Yeah.
buy a pill, and that is more of a concern in the
Bigger way.
schools.
It is a big concern.
It's huge,
And they have
they'll
it-
grind up that Adderall and snort it like
Well,
cocaine.
well, they-
And how about these mod pods? Not cannabis. These things that you can go and you can buy, off the. They look like an inhaler for cannabis, but it's filled with nicotine or it has what is the chemical? The stuff that makes smoke machines for Halloween, and it
Nitrogen,
has
or no? What is it?
It starts with a G. I forget, but it's
We make products that have tons of that stuff in it, by the way. But keep going.
yeah, but the warning in small doses for what it's
The nicotine.
it's small, but the fact that
put other
there's
stuff in
there's
it, too.
warnings, you don't know what you're getting, you don't like, so some of the stuff that the kids are taking for
Yeah.
just for kicks is ridiculous, and you're looking at toxicity and what they have access to. I feel like that is a big thing, that they don't have access to cannabis. You have to buy it in a dispensary. Maybe you can get it black market, but I feel like the whole black market
You can
is
get-
smaller, and kids are
I don't know. The news
safer.
would argue with you on that one.
No, the kids are safer. They don't have access to cannabis. The dispensaries are pushing black market, out. Because adults are, unless they're forced to buy non-dispensary.
Well, but kids.
How about
That's
autism?
the thing is that is always going to happen, and it happened before we were legal. It's going to keep happening.
Absolutely.
People want to grow their own medicine or their own record. They want to grow their own weed. Now it's legal to grow your own weed to an
If
extent.
you're over 21
Right.
or a medical patient.
Right. So there is access to weed for teenagers. Absolutely. When I was a teenager, my boyfriend was growing plants as high as pine trees in his backyard. And,
Sativas.
and yes, which is why I didn't like it. As it turns out, I figured out why. Can't do sativas. But, people are going to grow it and they're going to sell it.
Right.
Or give it away. So, yes, I'm not going to downplay the problem of teenage access to anything.
Right.
My point would be that cannabis is not special in terms of prevention. It needs to be taught prevention just like everything else. No sex for you, no drugs for you,
Right.
no alcohol for you.
What is your conversation
No.
in your family about your rules and what is and isn't acceptable? It's just another thing that's added to that list.
People just get so hysterical about cannabis and they act like this is a new thing. Kids smoking weed is a new thing. I smoked weed when I was a kid. Did you smoke weed when you were a kid?
Hell no. I was going into the Air Force, be a fighter pilot.
Okay.
Shoot, one of my sisters got.
I had
Turned me
dreams.
on to
Top
it.
Gun came out when I was in 8th grade.
Oh, yeah.
Game
I
over.
guess I
There you
wouldn't
go.
smoke weed
That's
either. I mean, I didn't smoke a lot, but I tried it,
Yeah.
and I didn't like it.
I didn't smoke till college.
Kids are experimenting, and it is no different from weed than it ever was. The only one problem that we do have is that the potency is so much higher. Which would make me say you should then go to the black market where the weed isn't quite so potent. They'd be better off, ironically. But this is not a school issue.
Maybe
with
there's still
medical
hope
marijuana.
for the cartels then. Brickweed.
I know.
You've still got a shot, Brickweed.
You guys still got a shot.
there's
We
a-
need
there's
some
a-
slower
Season's
poetry
done.
There's a
stuff,
place for
right?
you in the legal market. Mexican drug cartels. The brickweed is safer in the respect that
Yes,
it doesn't
it's
have more
safer.
THC. It's
This-
also been sprayed with paraquat and Eagle 900 and
Which is, by the way, why people are going to the emergency room for when they overdose on weed. Is all the
Yeah.
there's a lot of
it's
chemicals.
gonna
contaminated.
turn out it's a pesticide.
Well, the other thing too, and this is really important because this discussion is coming up in January. They are going to try and introduce a bill to limit potency of all
that's
products
not right.
and flour to 15% or less.
All right, then if they're going to
So,
do that, let's
15%
put, let's
THC?
put limits on opioid dosing.
Well, that's not going to happen. So we know
Well,
But that's
alcohol
right.
content.
But
That's
this is going to
ridiculous.
happen, and people need to think about why this is bad. Not
My
so if
arthritis twinge
ostensibly,
just thinking about it.
right? Ostensibly, on the recreational market, it just means you're going to have to buy a little bit more weed, but on the medical market, people can't afford to double their consumption of weed. And if let's say you smoke it, now I have to smoke 20 puffs to get the same effect
Yeah.
as 2. That's not healthy for me.
Right.
That's not how I need to ingest it, and it will be too expensive. And medication, and plus the dosing, there's a reason there's dosing. There's a reason people do this many milligrams of this and this many grams of that, because that's what you need in one dose. And you can't get it by just stacking on more doses. You know
And
what I
every
mean?
patient's going to be individual. What
Right.
they need to help out with whatever their issue
And
is.
this goes back to what just drives me insane is we are legislating to criminal activity. Why aren't we legislating to protect the medical patients in the state? I mean, so people who break the law are always going to break the law. It doesn't really matter what law you make. So if you make a law for 15% potency, do you think that that means it's going to go away?
Right.
I understand the impetus from this, and I work not with, but Smart Colorado is a big anti-marijuana for kids organization. However, we agree on a few things. I don't think teenagers need to be dabbing. That's
Right.
horrible.
I agree.
And there are problems. People are experiencing more problems who are dabbing that are inexperienced. Like I know people who dab medically because they need that kind of THC volume.
Right.
But teenagers dabbing, not so good.
No.
But,
It's just-
what
it's
people are seeing
just ugly.
is the effect of that and
Right.
translating it to all marijuana. And you know, if my kid goes and smokes a joint, it probably won't be from my house because mine is locked up appropriately. He won't though. Let's say somebody else's kid because Cooper's like. Anyway, if a kid goes and hides at some of their friend's house and has a smoke of that joint, maybe 2 hits or whatever, there's probably not going to be that much consequence other than
Unless you
what we
start
all-
listening to the Grateful Dead,
Well, yeah, and then,
then you're
lots
gonna
of
end up
change will
getting a
happen.
tattoo.
But be very careful about making light of teenage drug consumption online. But that is not the same as a kid dabbing, and it doesn't have. Apparently, you guys, it is happening in schools a lot.
It's happening a lot.
I just saw it on the news actually.
Dabbing in schools?
Well, because
Yeah.
if you have it in a pen, it can be,
Right.
you
Oh, yeah.
know, the same reason adult likes
Yeah,
that as an
what makes
option.
it-
It's discreet. You can sneak it. It doesn't have a strong smell.
Right.
And so a
They
kid
were-
who's being sneaky,
Yeah.
you know, if they have
They just-
access,
There's just an article, a news story, like last week, I think, where they went to a high school, and I can't remember which high school it was, but I think it wasn't a Denver one, where they went to the principal's office. And she opened her drawer, and she had about 15 like dab type pens in there,
Wow.
like rigs. I
Yeah.
mean, and she was like smashing with a hammer. I'm like, that's a bit dramatic, but you know, that's the only thing she can do.
That's a
with
bit
them.
stupid.
But
Do
that's
not,
kind of-
but that's part
as
of
good idea.
purveyors
That's-
of lithium-ion batteries, do not hit a lithium-ion battery with a hammer for demonstration
you.
purposes.
That's-
I feel like
Especially what
that's-
she's hitting, which are those 18650s. Don't. That is stupid. I haven't seen that video.
I'll see if I can find it for you. But there is a problem in schools with teenagers doing that. Don't want to downplay that,
Yeah.
and I don't want kids on drugs at all.
I would like to see an
But don't screw that up. Don't mix that up with my son's medication.
Right.
He was
Yeah.
consuming way more THC than they ever will be.
How about an
And-
updated education plan? We live in a state where we have hemp, medical, and recreational legal, but we don't have an updated drug classroom education, anything,
We
no
need to start
curriculum. Well,
It's
am
just like sex education, though. If we teach them about it, they'll go do it. It's like, no, they're going to do it. Let's teach them about it so they don't get pregnant. It's the
Right.
same thing. If we teach them this dab rig, no. This does this does that. These are the general potencies, we talked about that when they introduced the potency idea 2 years ago.
Right.
A lot of the industry said, listen, we are more than happy to put up education, and we were joking around, like we would have like the ski signs, like green, blue diamond, black, for tourists who
That's-
don't have any idea.
Yeah. Right.
Green, here's some 15% flour.
Right.
Blue diamond dude has been coming in and, he's very familiar with cannabis.
That makes
and
total sense.
Yeah.
that has
That's
a blue
totally
diamond
proper.
for,
Yeah.
wax and shatter or
That's-
whatever,
Right.
Why not?
That
That is
makes
so much
total
better, because here
sense.
was my point to them. If I am a novice user, and this is what they were saying in that committee, this is directed towards the novice consumer and children. And I said, well, I was the only patient advocate in the room. I'm like,
Yay.
do I get to
Right.
talk? This was 2
Yeah.
years ago, so it was like, And I'm like, I am a novice because I wasn't smoking cannabis back then. I could not with the load of Jack's life. And I have a kid. So I have to tell you something. If you put a limit on the THC of 15%, or even right now, if I look at a label and I see 15% versus 20%, I have no idea what that means. Nothing. So a novice user, a potency limit is going to mean nothing to them because they don't know what that means. I'm like, you guys can you explain, like, you know, because then there's wax and chatter and flour and the oil, and nobody knows what that is. So you can make whatever law you want, and it's still not going to get to the goal that you're trying to reach, which is people not getting overly dosed on marijuana. And if you want to help people who aren't cannabis experienced, like the giant tourism industry that we have surrounding cannabis now, why don't you just educate them?
Right.
Just tell them. I mean, it's really quite simple. And then you solve the problem you're looking to solve, and not make laws that won't solve the problem and hurt a giant community of people.
Well, and
Patients.
you know, what they don't understand is they're setting their bodies up for not being able to help them. If I dabbed, the concentrates I take at night wouldn't be as effective.
Right.
I would be completely overly saturated, and when I did get into another problem of pain, there would be not enough.
Right.
You know, and it's kind of like saying, oh, I have arthritis pain in my wrist. Instead of taking an Advil, which would get rid of it, let me take an Oxy.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
And
Right.
it's the difference in
But
that.
you know, we don't know these things because marijuana is illegal, and we get dogged all the time that we have to play doctor for ourselves, which should not be a crime. When
Should be a
doctors
right.
became
In fact,
the
I thought it
police
was
or
a right.
something, or a government entity, doctors are not government entities. You do not have to follow a doctor's recommendation. A doctor is your employee.
Yeah.
You are paying a doctor for their advice.
Yeah.
And we have turned it around and given them complete control over us.
Right.
And look at what
Yeah,
they look at our system. And you know, not that there aren't good doctors, it's just that the paradigm in which they were
Doctors are
educated
mechanics
and,
for your body.
you know,
You can go
yes,
shop around
you
for
can
different
shop.
treatments, different skill
Absolutely.
sets. You don't have to do a damn thing they say.
No, you do not. Unless
I
you're a
went
mom
to
getting
5
bullied
of
by the
them
state.
when I got
but
diagnosed.
it's not. It's so if we have a choice, then we are going to be self-medicating. But we don't have the medical backing in the traditional sense of Western medicine, which is, you know, all these studies, and they love to talk about the literature. If I heard one more time, well, the literature doesn't support that when Jack was alive,
Right,
because
right.
he was the 1% where either if it worked for 100 people, 99 people it wouldn't work for Jack. If it didn't work for 99 people, it would work for Jack. And
But
I
what about
couldn't get
any other
support.
drug? Any
That's what I
other
mean.
drug
Okay,
does
we don't have
not work
access.
consistently for every single person. That's why there are people who will try certain
My
drugs.
point exactly. So Jack so it worked for 99 people, but it didn't work for Jack. We have to remember that averages are averages. Think about a bell curve. So the people on the average are not the only people who exist. There are people on the other side of that bell curve, and in fact, the majority of people, you know, there's a big hunk of people on either side of the average by definition.
Yeah.
And so we treat to the average and we marginalize everyone else. And in the case of cannabis, we criminalize everyone else. You know, I mean, we stigmatize people who don't fall within that on the bell curve, right on the average there, for whatever, for disease, for treatment, for whatever. We're in a society of what's the average.
Right.
And people are trained to think that the average is it, and the average is going to work for everybody. Ibuprofen, standard dose, 200 milligrams.
Right.
So me, you, my 12-year-old, my 90-year-old grandma, all get 200 milligrams, based on what? Averages. What if you have to lie outside the average?
Well, you can have up to 800, you know. But, you know, it just...
Right. Or
I
what
wanna
if you
show
don't
everybody
need-
something.
What if you
Yeah.
only need 50? So, and then, okay, so my point with this whole thing is that's how medicine works, Western medicine works. It's the same for cannabis.
Yes.
I need this amount at this time of this strain. I can't do that strain, even though most people can. I can't,
Right.
you know, or whatever. And I've titrated my dose exactly the same as
Well,
other medicine.
yeah. I
Only
don't
doesn't kill you.
remember which senator we were talking to, but we were at Mel's house. It was one of those community meetings that
Melanie
we loved.
Rose Rogers
Yes.
from
Influential
X.
Mwah.
Yes, absolutely. Blow her kisses.
Chris Kennedy.
Yes, possibly. And he
Dylan
was
Roberts.
talking, was one of them, but the point was we were talking about, you know, just like any other medication, you start off slow. You know, and
Yes.
if we were going to go to the doctor and say I was going to be given something for arthritis, well, I'd be started on a certain dose, and then I'd go back 6 weeks later and be evaluated, and
They do it for antidepressants.
and they do it for
do
antidepressants.
everything.
If you're looking at a long-term illness, you build it, and then they go and they test your blood to make sure that your body is absorbing it, and
Right.
all this other kind. And all of this can be done for cannabis.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Except
You
you
know?
could just test my pee and make sure I got enough in there.
I think you'd be fine.
I want to show everybody real quick this. They say when they talk about it's not in the literature. So if you go to Google and you search for PubMed
Check it out, it's behind
and you go to
Right, isn't that cool? It's
NCBI,
pretty cool.
right at the top here, you can just type in. This is the repository of all of the literature. If it's a legit study, the abstract at least is available on PubMed, and it's a free site, and you can just go in there and you can type in cannabis and say Alzheimer's. Oops. That monitor's so far away now. Alzheimer. Where? Search for that. And then boom. Guess what? There's tons of literature.
Oh, that's
Pages of
only
it.
page one, yeah.
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 And then you can click through. And let's see. Is cannabidiol a promising substance for new drug development? That sounds like something I'd be interested in. Be like the type of thing that I read. You know, this is the literature. When they're not, if it's a legit study, it's not in some secret vault somewhere. It is on the internet. It's at PubMed, and you can go
Sometimes
read it.
you have to pay for
and
it.
Then
if it
sometimes
some
you have to
people-
pay
yeah.
for it.
But at least
but-
the abstract is free, right?
But it's all out there, and there's a ton of it. And so I just won't even hear it when somebody say, well, there aren't any studies that. I'm like, bullshit. Go to PubMed. I bet you're wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my little public service announcement. I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, that's
Oh,
good.
I like the
I
public
love
service
resources, and I strongly advocate for people when you're looking at this type of research and you're looking for data, cite your source. You know, it's so much more credible when you're able to say this study from, you know, Harvard Med or the study from wherever it was, and if you remember the name of the person who did it, like to have some kind of a link that it's just not you know.
Spouting off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna, you know.
Although the opposition likes to spout off all the time.
But that's part of the responsibility of being an advocate within the cannabis industry, to comply with the law so we don't mess it up for other people, to do your research, to when you're sharing information, make sure it's accurate. And if you say something or share something that's not accurate, then it's up to you to clarify it, and not leave that misinformation out there.
Right.
You know, that we have a responsibility to help educate other people and to make sure that we're doing it responsibly.
Well, and that gets us back to Nuvolution.
I was thinking the same
And
thing.
it absolutely gets us back, because one of the many, many conversations you and I have had is about fiscal responsibility and doing things
Absolutely.
correctly. And, you know, I've been a part of other business marketing organizations and how we kind of mentored. And it's not only that, what you're doing is bigger, because with all these small nonprofits, and there's nowhere to have events that has parking, handicap
ADA
accessibility.
compliant.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You know, today I am walking just fine. And I haven't used my
But
cane in
that's
3
not
months.
every day for
Last year,
people.
I was in a wheelchair. You know, so, you know, and it's not just me. We have so many people that can't go to anything because they literally cannot get in the door.
Yep.
Well,
You
and
know?
I think one of the things that we're really excited about is that we are focusing our community center around wellness and cannabis. And wellness is not just your physical health, but it can be emotional, it can be spiritual, it can be occupational, there's financial, there's so many different levels of wellness. And how does that play in with cannabis? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are pushing cannabis or you are, it just means that you are looking at things with an open mind and a clear head. And if people want additional information, it's okay to be on the fence. It's okay to say, I want to learn more, I want to know more. The difficulty is if you're Googling something, if you don't understand something, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
And so where do you go to get accurate information where you
PubMed.
Yeah, and so we bring
and
in
Nuvolution,
and Nuvolution,
I
of
just want to
course.
give one last shout out.
Yeah, no, we will definitely put that on our resource page.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, what's cool is this is a non-consumption place where
Yeah.
we are saying, hello, hairdresser, please come in.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, mechanic, air conditioner, whatever you
People
are.
want to know how it
come be
affects
that
them
here.
personally and professionally. Whether it's for them, personally, whether it's within their job, how is
Right.
it going to affect their family? How do you have a conversation? One of the big ones that I think of, with Jack's Law, the number of kids who weren't going to school, who are, I'm getting goosebumps, who now can go to school. That
Yeah.
wasn't even
Right.
an option for them.
Yeah.
Well, they're in school, they're joining scout troops, they're joining sports teams,
Yep.
they're joining different academic clubs. They're involved in their school environment. Who's having a conversation with their peers to help teach them why this is medicine and it's the right choice for this child, but it is not the right choice if you don't require it
Well, that's a
medically.
big deal too, because I think one of the biggest complaints I heard from Smart Colorado is that the parents don't even know enough about the products on cannabis products now to even talk to their kids about it, and that's we've got to have that education. But if we can't get it into the school, what are we supposed to do? A lot of the schools won't allow us. We have education prepared, but how are we supposed to give it to them if we can't get to school? So a question becomes how do we attract parents? And maybe like Nuvolution having a place where they don't have to be worried because maybe they're big giant, even if they're anti-marijuana, which we don't care.
A
We
safe
want to be able to
place.
go, okay, there's not going to be weed here, but I can maybe learn this.
Right.
Because we're still working with trying to get this formal education into the school. We're going to try and hit up some PTA groups and stuff.
I want to
but
hit up
people just freaks out.
FFA
Freak out.
right now.
Yeah.
Well, I think the first place you start
teach
is
them about it
with
through
the
the-
adults that are responsible for
gonna be a
educating
thing.
the kids. As a parent, your responsibility is to filter the information that you want to share with your children and then present it in a way that's age appropriate. My conversation with my junior in high school is not going to be the same as somebody would have with their preschooler.
Right.
It's just it's age appropriate. How do you talk to them? And if you don't tell them the truth, they're not going to believe you.
There has shown us that.
If you are trying to tell kids that cannabis is the same damn thing as heroin and cocaine and every other heavy, scary drug out there, they're going to call bullshit and they're not going to listen to anything you say. So
Yeah.
it's permissible to say, I don't believe this is a good choice for you, and here are the reasons why.
Right.
But to have an intelligent conversation, and we want our kids to be able to think for themselves and to defend the argument, but give them a logical argument. Help them along with that. It's not something that they know intuitively.
Well, what I did as a mom, in about to face my battle, literally.
Sure.
I sat my teenage sons down and we watched both of Sanjay Gupta's documentaries, and I think that is
was just talking
extremely
about that
age
last
appropriate for teenagers. And sit down, watch it as a family, and if they have a question, stop it.
Yes.
Answer the question. And mine, with my boys, it was South Louisiana, a little bit scary. Here my mom's an activist already and political, and oh crap, what is she doing now kind of scenario. And it started out with, guys, you've been lied to and I'm about to tell you the truth. But I was the hippie trippy mom. You know, you had a headache, you got a massage. You know, you got bee pollen if you had hay fever. You know,
Sure.
so I was already of that mindset. So it wasn't that bad for my boys. But if I was, you know, say, you know, somebody that worked at a bank and everything I did was taken by a doctor, I would have a hard time.
Yeah,
But
my kid sends me video clips on marijuana issues.
right.
I was off hiking with Michelle the other day, and I get this text from Cooper, and there's this thing that he follows that's, I can't remember the name of it, but they speak on a
Probably
lot of social
Fortnite.
issues. No, like it's like a really cool take on a lot of different social issues, and
Not like
and
a
they
TED
do
Talks.
no, and they do like cooking, and they do everything. And I get a text from him, and they did one on it's called 3 Reasons Why Marijuana Should Not Be Legalized. But you have to understand, this group of people actually hits both sides of the issue when they do it really well, which is why Cooper's been watching these people for
Number
5,
one,
6
it
years.
will take profits out of the pockets of drug cartels. Number 2, it will take profits out of the pockets of drug companies. Number 3, it will take profits out of the pockets of the private prison industrial complex.
Oh,
Those are
absolutely.
the top 3
And
reasons
wake
why
us
you
up
should
mentally.
keep it illegal.
Right, and wake us up mentally. But anyway, so my kid, I was just thinking about the typical kid knows nothing about it. My kid's, he's going, oh, Mom, check this out. He's like sending me research and
I love
commentary
that.
and stuff. I'm like, very nice. And, you know, like your kids
Yeah.
who have had experience with activism and stuff.
Well, that, and you know, I don't take a lot of medicines. I've never been able to. I'm not immunized and stuff like that. So I've always had herbal alternatives to medications in the home. And like all 5 of my children have a neurological something from ADD to epilepsy. And so I did mind meditations with them. I did behavior modifications with them. And everything else but medication, including karate, before I medicated my child. You know, if I had knocked everything else first.
Yeah.
And I really am glad I did. I wish I had been, if I could do it now, of course, you know, the factory's closed, that's not a consideration, but if I was a mother at this time, a young mother, I would have totally started that hyperactive 3-year-old out on CBD, you know, and done things, you know, stay within the naturopathic role
If
I was
we
in.
knew then
but-
what we know now.
Yeah. So,
My life would be better, my son. You guys know
Yeah.
that song? If I knew then. I think it's Real Big Fish or something.
Yeah.
But no, not Real Big Fish. It's something to do with fish. Trout fishing in America. How's that for reading?
Wow.
Goodness.
Wow.
Where
That
did
was
we get
pretty
to-
impressive,
Whew.
Travis.
Yeah.
I saw those guys in a bar in Texas where Willie Nelson used to play all the time. And I also saw Willie Nelson play there. But anyway, we got to package up a bunch of product here. Or not package up a bunch, but we got web orders to get out, and
Stuff
so
to do.
I want to make sure that everybody knows that you are welcome to attend the Nuvolution.
Absolutely.
Lunch
We
and
have
Learn.
lunch and learns third Fridays of every month. We will be adding more stuff as our space is opening up. We are decorating it as a cannabis history museum. I don't know, for those of you who are not familiar with the regulations around marketing, anything that is cannabis specific, especially the medical and the rec, it cannot be marketed to anything that would be more than 23% kids. So that means, you know, stuff in a museum or schools or community centers, that kind of stuff. And so we are able to decorate, we are able to share information and have that in one place. And right now, at least in Denver, we don't really have that. You have businesses that have their individual space and they decorate, they have their logo up, but you can't go someplace and learn about cannabis. You know, you can go to a Sensi night or you can go, but it's pop-ups. You go,
Right.
it's one night and it's done. You know, so to have a place where people know that
Yeah.
they can come to, that they can learn something. I'm very big into experiential education, and so I want you to be able to come in and see and touch and
Yeah.
not taste THC, because we are non-consumption, but we can have CBD products. We can have discussions. We can have education. We can do fun things, and it's the limit is our imaginations.
Right.
We're pretty imaginative people.
Absolutely.
Thank you, cannabis.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I believe is the real reason cannabis is illegal.
I
The
do
people
too.
who make it illegal use it, and they're like, "Oh hell no, we're not letting the masses have this."
Right.
Now, if
Yeah.
I thought of that,
Right.
don't you think somebody else might have thought about that?
Well, let's
Why do you
talk
think
about
we're taking
yeah.
pharmaceuticals?
I still think we're
What
a
if
simulation.
pharmaceuticals do you? Does anybody
They
see
numb the
the
brain.
videos of Jack before and after?
Yes.
The Jack
Yeah.
and
Drugged
Jack.
out and
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
versus happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just like
Which one do we support in this country?
right. Well, my youngest son had a seizure his senior year in high school, and they upped his Keppra, and Keppra is an
Oh, it's
absolute
horrifying.
evil
Jack
drug.
told me he wanted to kill himself. He said it was making him crazy. He
Yeah.
thought he was losing his mind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
I've had
gosh.
that
I
conversation
hear
with
it
my
over
child.
and over and over and
Yeah.
over. It's awful.
And you go, here, my precious fruit of my womb. Take this.
This
that
will make you
might
want to kill yourself.
Yeah, it might make you suicidal. He literally had to drop out of college because he goes, Mom, I can't think. I cannot.
Do you know that I've never, in all the children that I've dealt with in the last 18 years, which is a lot, because before Jack was a cannabis activist, he was a disability rights activist, and we had lots of friends. I don't know, I have never met one single child, or well, their parents are the one who told me, that said that Keppra did not cause those problems with their kids. So it's not even like a
That's
small side
scary,
effect.
isn't it, though?
I
That's
think they minimize
terrifying.
it because
yeah.
I don't know. No one has ever said to me, "Oh, Keppra didn't have that effect on my kid." Every single one of them said, whether or not it stopped the seizures or whatever they prescribe it for. They prescribed it to Jack for dystonia,
Right.
and but every single one had those effects.
Well, they put me on something one time, and I found myself in the middle of a town that I've lived in for 25 years. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know why I was in my car. The only thing driving.
Oh, jeez.
And all of a sudden, I didn't know. And I was terrified, so I looked at my phone, and the last place I had been was my doctor's office 3 days before when they had put me on that medication. I was having a TIA from it. From the cocktail of neurologicals, I was having a mini stroke. So this isn't what they're arguing and wanting to keep in place is controlling our minds, and it's causing us, our bodies.
sick
And
buy more medicine.
how many times did you take Jack for blood work and they had to adjust his medicine because it was affecting his liver or another organ?
Not nearly enough, actually, because they didn't even, he had 15 doctors, sometimes 18. They didn't even track it closely. There's another travesty, is they weren't even tracking it close enough to do that. So he was getting prescriptions from like 4 of those doctors were prescribing for him, and I would ask the pharmacist, about interactions between drugs. I'd ask the other doctors, and I would barely get any response. He'll be all right.
Well, they put one of my kids on something every 6 weeks. We had a blood test. And I looked at that doctor. I said,
Oh, well, we
you
had
need
Medicaid.
to take him off of that.
So Jack was on Medicaid, so they don't do that because,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just another reason we need to legalize to get this stuff
So
done.
much work to be done.
Yes.
So much work to be done, and I'm glad we're all here doing it together.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Wouldn't
Gotta
do
stick
it
together.
with anybody else. My Canna fam.
That's
Can of
it.
fam.
Absolutely.
My son used that term the other day.
Aw.
It looks like I don't know why it's showing up there so I'm not sure what happened to our broadcast, but it is time to land this airship. We got to get some stuff out
Awesome.
of
Well,
here.
thank you for having us,
Yeah,
Travis.
thank you very,
Thank you,
very
Travis.
much. Love you guys, and
Love you.
let's see if it. So I'm gonna end this. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll get back to you in the responses, and talk to you later.